I never thought I'd be in this place, writing about the downfall of my marriage. My name is Mark, and my life took a turn I never expected when I found out my wife, Jenna, was cheating on me. We had been married for 5 years, and for the most part, I thought we had a solid relationship. Sure, there were bumps along the way, but what relationship doesn't have issues? But Jenna had a way of making me feel like everything was fine, even when it was. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. The late nights at work, the sudden interest in her appearance, and the unexplained absences that became more frequent. I remember her saying she needed to focus on her career and how important that was for her. I supported her, of course. Who wouldn't want to encourage their partner to succeed? But now I see that those were just clever excuses masking her true intentions. The first real clue came on a Friday night. I was waiting up for her to come home from what she claimed was an office party. She had gotten all dressed up, and when she walked out the door, I thought she looked stunning, maybe a little too stunning for a simple work gathering. By 1 a.m., I was getting worried. I tried calling her phone several times, but she didn't answer. When she finally came through the door, she was tipsy and full of laughter, claiming she had lost track of time. I should have smelled the whiskey on her breath, but instead, I just kissed her and tried to forget how uneasy I felt. But deep down, my instincts were screaming at me. A week later, I decided to investigate. I know it sounds cliché, but I took a look at her phone while she was in the shower. I found a series of texts from a number I didn't recognize. They were flirty, full of emojis, and clearly not from a colleague. My heart sank and I felt sick to my stomach. I'd never snooped before and I felt guilty, but at that moment I didn't care. After reading those messages, I was a man possessed. I spent the next few days gathering more evidence. I checked her social media and found pictures of her with this guy. His name was Steve, a friend she had never mentioned before. They looked cozy together and I couldn't help but feel the heat of betrayal coursing through my veins. I was furious, yet part of me was still in denial. Maybe there was an explanation, some misunderstanding. I wanted to confront her, but I needed to be sure. Then came the moment that shattered everything. I had a friend who worked at the bar where Jenna had been spotted with Steve more than once. After a few drinks one night, he casually dropped the bomb on me, mentioning how they were seen flirting right in front of the bartender. I couldn't breathe. It was like the ground had opened up beneath me. All the signs and suspicions I had brushed aside suddenly became crystal clear. That evening when Jenna came home, I confronted her. I laid out everything, her late nights, the texts, the pictures, the eyewitness accounts from my friend. Instead of being shocked or remorseful, she turned defensive. "You're being ridiculous, Mark. It's harmless fun," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with irritation. She accused me of being paranoid and insecure. The audacity! I could see the lies in her eyes, yet she twisted the narrative as if I was the one at fault. Her reactions made my blood boil. I thought I'd be met with tears or apologies, but instead I got indignation. That's when the reality of it all hit me. She didn't care about me or our marriage. I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces as I realized the woman I loved had been living a double life, and I was nothing but a fool. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. Anger coursed through me, followed by a deep sadness. I loved Jenna, but in that moment I felt like I didn't even know her. The woman I had shared my life with was nothing more than a stranger. I was torn between wanting to save our marriage and the desire to walk away from the toxic situation she had created. It was a whirlwind of emotions, and I didn't know what to do next. Should I fight for her? Should I let her go? I found myself spiraling into a maze of doubt and confusion, trapped in a web of lies she had spun. In the following days, I had to make a decision that would change everything. The question remained: how far was I willing to go for a love that felt so betrayed? In the days that followed the confrontation, I felt suffocated by the weight of betrayal. Jenna continued to act as if everything was normal, and that made my blood boil even more. She would walk around the house, humming her favorite tunes, asking if I wanted dinner, as if I hadn't just accused her of infidelity. I was living with a ghost of the woman I thought I knew, and it was driving me insane. I needed to clear my head. I took long walks around the neighborhood, replaying everything in my mind. I thought about our wedding, the vows we made, and the dreams we shared. I was supposed to be her partner, her confidant, but instead, I felt like a prisoner in my own home. The love I had for her felt tainted now, and I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. One evening, I decided to talk to my best friend, Tom. He had been my sounding board for years, and I needed someone to help me process all of this. We met at our favorite bar, a dimly lit place that felt like a second home. I sat across from him, barely able to make eye contact, the weight of my heartbreak hanging heavily between us. "Mark, what's going on?" Tom asked, concern etched on his face. I could see he wanted to help, but how could I explain this monumental betrayal? I took a deep breath and laid it all out, every detail of Jenna's lies, the affair, the confrontation. "Dude, I don't know what to say. That's messed up," Tom replied, shaking his head. "Have you thought about what you want to do? I mean, you don't have to stay with her." I knew he was right, but leaving wasn't that easy. The thought of walking away from 5 years of marriage felt like a defeat, but what was I fighting for? A relationship built on lies. I felt torn, like I was standing at a crossroads with no clear path ahead. "Honestly, I'm just so angry," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm also heartbroken. I thought we were happy." "The truth is, you deserve better, man. You can't stay in a relationship where you're not respected," Tom said firmly. I appreciated the support, but the idea of actually leaving felt like a mountain to climb. I had built my life with Jenna. We had plans, dreams, and a future together. But the image of that future was now overshadowed by her betrayal. That night I went home with a heavy heart and conflicting thoughts, unsure of what to do next. When I entered our house, Jenna was curled up on the couch, watching TV. She looked up and smiled at me, and I realized I felt nothing. The warmth I once felt for her had been replaced by a cold void. I spent the entire night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. I wanted her to feel the pain she caused me. I wanted to show her that she couldn't just manipulate the truth and get away with it. But revenge is a double-edged sword. I had to ask myself, what would it achieve? Would it heal my wounds, or would it just dig the knife in deeper? By the next morning, I had a plan forming in my mind. If Jenna thought she could play me for a fool, then I needed to turn the tables. I'd let her believe everything was fine while I gathered more evidence, all while plotting my next move. It was a twisted game of patience, and I wasn't sure how it would play out. I started by casually interacting with her, feigning interest in her day-to-day life. I'd ask about work and her friends, all the while keeping a mental note of her responses. Every now and then, I would throw in a question about Steve, her friend, just to gauge her reactions. I wanted to see if she would slip up or if I could catch her in another lie. In the weeks that followed, I became a detective in my own home. I started tracking her movements, noting the times she went out and when she'd return home, always with that same carefree attitude. Each time she walked through the door, my heart would sink further into the pits of despair. How could she be so nonchalant about everything? But I was determined to keep my composure. I began to document everything, the late nights, the text messages, the excuses. I even started collecting information about Steve, researching him online, trying to find out just how deep this affair went. The more I discovered, the angrier I became, but I had to stay focused. I was building a case against her, one that would ultimately lead to my revenge. As I delved deeper into this web of lies, I realized I was on a dangerous path. This wasn't just about getting back at Jenna, it was about reclaiming my life. I wanted to take the power back that she had stripped from me. I needed to be in control of my own narrative, even if that meant diving into the harsh reality of our crumbling marriage. Each day was a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, determination. I felt like I was living in two worlds, one where I was still her husband, and another where I was plotting my escape. And as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't help but wonder how far I was willing to go in this game of deception. The stakes were high, and I was ready to play. As I continued my descent into this tangled web of deceit, I found myself wrapped in an emotional turmoil that was both exhausting and oddly invigorating. I felt like a man on a mission, but the further I got into Jenna's lies, the more I realized how much I was losing myself in the process. I wasn't just angry, I was becoming obsessed, and I knew I had to tread carefully. One evening, I received a text from Tom. He wanted to get together again, sensing my mood swings and need for support. I appreciated his friendship, but I didn't want to burden him with the details of my revenge plan. Instead, I decided to keep things light. I met him at our usual spot, a cozy diner where we could grab burgers and unwind. "Hey man, you look a little better," Tom remarked as I took a seat across from him. "How's it going with Jenna?" "Still the same," I replied, suppressing a sigh, "but I'm figuring things out." "Figuring things out how?" he pressed, raising an eyebrow. I hesitated for a moment. I didn't want to spill everything, but I also needed to let off some steam. "I'm just gathering information, you know. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with." "Information is good," Tom agreed, but I could tell he was concerned. "Just be careful, you don't want to get too deep in this. You could lose yourself." I nodded, but his warning didn't fully register. I was already in too deep, and the thrill of playing detective was hard to resist. I needed to see Jenna's reaction when she found out I knew the truth. I wanted to catch her off guard, to watch her scramble in the face of her lies. That weekend, Jenna had planned a girls' night out, supposedly a get-together with her work friends. She dressed up, putting on a form-fitting dress that accentuated her curves. As she applied her makeup, I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy mixed with despair. She looked beautiful, but it was for someone else. I reminded myself to stay focused. "Have fun tonight," I said, forcing a smile onto my face. "Thanks, babe, I will," she chirped back, oblivious to the internal struggle raging within me. Once Jenna was gone, I knew I had a few hours to act. I grabbed my phone and began scrolling through my notes and the evidence I had gathered. I had captured everything: her text, messages, timestamps of her late nights, and even the names of those she had hung out with. But I had one more piece of the puzzle to uncover. I needed to learn more about Steve. I did a quick search online and found his social media profiles. The first few images revealed a cocky guy with a devil-may-care attitude, always surrounded by women and partying. Everything about him screamed bad news. I knew Jenna had been drawn to his charm, and that made my blood boil. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I had decided to head to the bar where Jenna and Steve had been seen together. This was my chance to witness her with him, to catch them in the act. I wasn't sure what I would do if I saw them together, but part of me felt like I needed this confrontation. When I arrived at the bar, the atmosphere was buzzing with energy. I slid onto a bar stool and ordered a drink, scanning the room for any sign of Jenna or Steve. My heart raced as I imagined the possibilities. If I caught them together, it would be the ultimate proof of her betrayal. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted Jenna laughing at a table in the back, her head thrown back in that carefree way I used to adore. But she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was Steve, leaning in close and whispering something that made her giggle. The sight twisted my gut. I felt the heat of betrayal wash over me like a tidal wave. I stayed hidden in the shadows, my hands gripping the edge of the bar. Watching her like this was both painful and exhilarating. I was a spectator to my own personal tragedy, and I didn't know whether to confront her right there or wait until she came home. As I observed the scene, I couldn't help but notice how comfortable Jenna seemed around him. They were sharing intimate glances, and it was clear their chemistry was electric. I felt like I was being stabbed repeatedly, each laugh they shared cutting deeper. The anger that had been simmering inside me ignited into a full-blown fire, but I had to maintain my composure. I needed to think strategically. I couldn't just storm in and create a scene. Instead, I decided to text Tom, sharing my location and the shocking news. I needed someone to understand the devastation I was witnessing, someone who could help ground me before I made any reckless decisions. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with a reply. "You okay, man? Do you want me to come?" "No," I replied, "I'll handle it. Just needed to let it out. I wanted to deal with this on my own. It was my battle to fight." As the night wore on, I watched Jenna and Steve, and I couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. I was a ghost in my own life, watching my wife betray me right before my eyes. And in that moment, I realized that I had the power to change the narrative. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the truth any longer. With a plan forming in my mind, I decided to wait until Jenna left the bar before I confronted her. I wanted to catch her off guard, to show her that I held the cards, not her. I would let her think she had won this game, until I was ready to reveal that I had known everything. All along, it was time to turn the tables and make her live in a maze of lies just as she had done to me. The next step would be pivotal, and I needed to be ready. As the hours dragged on, I felt my heart racing in anticipation. Jenna and Steve eventually made their way to the exit, and I slid down from my bar stool, slipping into the shadows to follow them. I needed to be careful, not only to avoid detection but also to maintain the element of surprise. The plan was simple. I would catch them outside, and I would confront her in a way that would leave no room for denial. She had manipulated the truth for too long. Now it was time for her to face the reality of her betrayal. I watched them from a distance as they stepped into the cool night air, their laughter fading into the darkness. My pulse quickened as I realized they were standing close to each other, the chemistry still palpable. But instead of rushing in, I took a deep breath and allowed the moment to sink in. I had to control my emotions. This was about showing her the truth, not blinding rage. Then I saw it. Jenna leaned in to kiss Steve on the cheek, her lips grazing his skin as they said their goodbyes. That was my breaking point. Rage surged through me, and I stepped out from my hiding place, my voice steady but laced with fury. Jenna. She turned, and for a split second her expression morphed from surprise to panic. Mark, what are you doing here? She stammered, her eyes darting between me and Steve, who stood frozen like a deer caught in headlights. I could ask you the same thing, I replied, trying to keep my voice collected even as my anger bubbled beneath the surface. I thought you were at a girls' night out. I was, she stuttered, clearly caught off guard. I just ran into Steve on my way home. And you thought it was a good idea to share a moment with him outside the bar. I shot back, pointing a finger at Steve, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Is that your idea of harmless fun? Jenna opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. I could see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to come up with an excuse that would get her out of this. Instead of letting her speak, I pressed on, fueled by the adrenaline of the moment. I saw you two together inside. I saw how cozy you were. You can't lie to me anymore, Jenna. I know everything. Her face turned pale, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes, but then she quickly masked it with indignation. You're being ridiculous. There's nothing going on between us, she exclaimed, her voice rising defensively. Nothing, I echoed, incredulous. You were just about to kiss him goodbye. How much clearer does it need to be? Steve, who had been standing silently, finally cleared his throat. Maybe I should go, he said, glancing nervously between us. I shot him a glare that could have burned holes in steel. No, you're part of this mess, I said, turning my attention back to Jenna. You think you can manipulate the truth, but you're living in a maze of lies. How long did you think you could keep this up? Jenna opened her mouth, ready to spit out another excuse, but I wasn't interested in hearing her half-hearted attempts at justification. I needed to lay it all out on the table. You're playing with people's hearts and lives, Jenna. You think you can just flit between your husband and your friend without consequences. I told you I wasn't doing anything wrong. She snapped, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. You need to trust me. I've done nothing to hurt you. Trust, I exclaimed, the word echoing in the quiet street. How can I trust someone who's been lying to me every step of the way? You've shattered that trust, and now you want me to pretend like everything's okay. For a moment we stood in silence, the weight of the truth hanging heavily between us. I could see tears welling in her eyes, but I didn't feel a flicker of sympathy. I had spent too long being manipulated by her charm. I needed to stand firm, even if it meant facing her pain head-on. Mark, she started, her voice shaking, please, let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. I cut her off, my voice cold. You've made your choice. I just want you to admit it. You've been cheating on me with him. The admission hung in the air like a dark cloud, and Jenna's shoulders slumped, defeated. I can explain, she whispered, but I could see she was grasping at straws. I was done listening to her excuses. Spare me the details, I said, my tone hardening. I don't want to hear how you justified this to yourself. You've betrayed my trust, and I won't let you manipulate the narrative any longer. Mark, please. Jenna's voice trailed off, and I could see the reality of the situation dawning on her. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I stated flatly, "and now you have to face the consequences." As the silence stretched between us, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could either walk away, leaving her to figure out the mess she had created, or I could dig deeper, exposing every lie she had spun and letting her feel the weight of her actions. "Here, what's going to happen?" I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to fight for this marriage anymore. You've made it clear that you're not committed to us. I'm done being the fool in your games." Tears began to stream down her cheeks, and for the first time I felt a flicker of empathy, but I quickly squashed it. She had made her choices, and now she needed to own them. "Mark, please don't do this," she pleaded, her voice tremulous. "I can change. I can make it right." "No, Jenna," I replied, shaking my head. "You don't get to rewrite this story. You've chosen your path, and now it's time for me to choose mine." With that, I turned away from her, leaving her standing there with Steve. I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but the pain of betrayal still stung. I had stepped into the maze of her lies, and now I was finally finding my way out. It was time to reclaim my life and my truth, and I wouldn't let her manipulate me any longer. As I walked away, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. No more games, no more lies. It was time for me to forge a new path, one that didn't include the betrayal that had shattered my heart. The journey wouldn't be easy, but it was one I was determined to take. I had been pushed to the brink, but now I was ready to rise anew. The days following that confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Walking away from Jenna was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but it was also liberating. I had finally taken a stand against the lies that had consumed our marriage. Now I was alone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I spent the next week in an emotional haze, sorting through the wreckage of my marriage. I deleted Jenna's number from my phone, unfollowed her on social media, and ripped up any remnants of our shared life, whether it was photographs or mementos that reminded me of happier times. I was determined to cut the ties that bound me to her, but the pain still lingered like an unwelcome ghost. My friends rallied around me, offering support and distraction. Tom was there every step of the way, inviting me out to watch games, go hiking, and just talk. I took solace in the fact that I had people who cared about me and wanted to help me move forward. One evening, while sitting on my couch, I decided it was time to delve into my feelings and come to terms with everything that had happened. I poured myself a drink and opened my laptop, and I began to write. I needed to articulate my thoughts. I wanted to understand the emotional roller coaster I had been on. I started typing as the words flowed from my heart. I wrote about the love I had for Jenna, the dreams we had shared, and the crushing realization that she had betrayed me. I reflected on the signs I had ignored, the red flags that had been waving in front of me for months. But more importantly, I wrote about my journey to reclaim my self-worth, about how I had stood up for myself after so long of being a passive participant in my own life. As I poured my heart onto the page, I felt a catharsis wash over me. It was almost as if I was shedding the old me, the man who had been blind to the truth, allowing room for a new Mark to emerge. I knew I wouldn't heal overnight, but I was beginning to understand that I had the power to reshape my narrative. After I finished writing, I took a moment to reflect. I realized I didn't want to dwell on revenge. Sure, I had thought about it in the heat of the moment, about how I wanted Jenna to feel the pain I felt, but I also understood that revenge would only keep me trapped in a cycle of negativity. Instead, I wanted to rise above it all. The following weeks passed in a blur as I focused on healing. I filled my calendar with activities that brought me joy, going to the gym, reconnecting with old friends, and even picking up hobbies I had long set aside for the sake of my marriage. I discovered a passion for photography, spending weekends capturing the beauty of the world around me. Each snap of the camera felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. But even with this newfound freedom, there were moments of weakness. I'd catch myself staring at my phone, wondering if Jenna would reach out. I imagined her sitting alone, reflecting on what she had lost. But I also reminded myself that I was no longer that man who would wait for her. I had learned a painful lesson, and now it was time to embrace my independence. One day, a little over a month after our confrontation, I received a text from Tom asking me to join him for drinks with some friends. I hesitated for a moment but ultimately decided to go. I needed to remind myself how to enjoy life without the shadow of my past looming over me. When I arrived at the bar, I could feel the excitement in the air. My friends welcomed me with open arms, and for several hours we laughed, told stories, and enjoyed each other's company. It felt good to be surrounded by people who appreciated me for who I was. As the night went on, I found myself in a conversation with a woman named Sarah, a friend of Tom. She was warm, funny, and surprisingly easy to talk to. Something about her energy was infectious. As we exchanged stories, I could feel the weight of my past slowly lifting. I realized that I was starting to open up to the idea of moving forward, of maybe finding someone new to share my life with, when I was ready, of course. But as I departed the bar that night, my mind shifted back to Jenna. I thought about how she had manipulated the truth, how her actions had caused an avalanche of hurt that had changed the course of my life. I wouldn't allow her to take up any more space in my head. I had a journey ahead of me, and I was determined to embrace it fully. Weeks turned into months, and I continued to focus on my growth. I made it a point to surround myself with positivity, friends who uplifted me, hobbies that sparked joy, and new experiences that challenged my comfort zone. I became more involved in photography, even considering showcasing my work in a local art exhibit. I found myself more confident and self-assured than I had been in years. One afternoon, as I was packing my camera equipment for a shoot, I received an unexpected call from Jenna. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to pick up. "Hey Mark," she said, her voice wavering slightly. I wanted to talk. I paused, unsure of how to respond. "What do you want, Jenna?" "I know I messed up," she said, her tone sincere. "I've realized how much I took for granted and I wanted to apologize." I heard the sincerity in her voice, but even so, a part of me felt a twinge of anger. "You can't just call me up and expect everything to be okay," I said, my voice steady. "You broke my trust, Jenna. I'm trying to move on from everything." "I know," she replied quickly, "and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I regret my choices and I hope you can find happiness even if it's without me." Her words hung in the air and I felt a mix of emotions flood my mind. I wanted to tell her how much she had hurt me, how her actions had shattered my world. But instead, I took a deep breath and responded, "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it, but I'm not sure I can ever forget what happened. I'm building a new life for myself." "I understand. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry," she said softly before we exchanged awkward goodbyes. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of closure. I realized I had finally stepped out of the shadow of my past and into the light of my future. Jenna's apologies would not define me or my journey. I had emerged stronger and wiser, equipped with the lessons learned from the pain. Looking ahead, I understood that I still had a lot of work to do, but I was committed to healing. I wouldn't give up on love, nor would I allow the betrayal to sour my view of what was possible. I was ready to embrace the new chapter of my life, and I knew that the maze of lies I had walked through would only serve as a stepping stone to something greater. I had been through the fire, but now I was ready to rise from the ashes, determined to forge a new path guided by self-love, resilience, and hope for what lay ahead. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. In the months that followed my conversation with Jenna, life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. I poured myself into my photography, dedicating weekends to capturing the beauty of nature, people, and candid moments. The more I immersed myself in my art, the more I discovered a sense of purpose and fulfillment that I had long overlooked during my marriage. I began to see the world through a different lens, one that focused on the present rather than the painful past. My photographs started to capture not just images but emotions, experiences, and stories that I had once been too consumed by heartache to appreciate. I felt a sense of empowerment that came with reclaiming my life, and it was exhilarating. One day, as I was preparing for an upcoming exhibit, I received a message from Tom. He wanted to meet for drinks and discuss something important. I arrived at our usual bar, curious about what he had to share. "Hey man," Tom said, greeting me with a warm smile. "I wanted to let you know that I'm proud of you. You've come such a long way since everything happened with Jenna." "Thanks, Tom," I replied, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over me. It hasn't been easy, but I'm getting there. As we chatted about my photography and the exhibit, Tom's expression shifted. "There's something else I wanted to bring up. I know you're still carrying some hurt and anger over Jenna, and I just wanted to remind you that it's okay to feel that way. You don't have to rush the healing process." "I appreciate that," I said. "I've been working on accepting what happened and learning from it. But I also know I need to focus on moving forward." "Exactly," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings." I clinked my glass against his and we savored the moment. It was a reaffirmation of my journey, a reminder that I was not alone in this process. I had friends who supported me, and I was building a network of positivity around me. As the weeks rolled on, the day of my exhibit finally arrived. I was both nervous and excited as I set up my photographs in the gallery space, a place filled with light, creativity, and admiration for the human experience. I had invited friends, family, and even a few acquaintances I'd met along the way, including Sarah, the woman I had met at the bar months prior. We had been texting and talking more frequently, and I felt a spark of connection with her that was refreshing and new. When the doors opened, I was greeted by an outpouring of kindness and encouragement. People wandered through the gallery, admiring the pieces and sharing their thoughts. I felt a wave of pride wash over me as I watched strangers engage with my work. I had captured moments of vulnerability, joy, and beauty, and it was evident that they resonated with others. As the evening progressed, Sarah arrived, and I was thrilled to see her. She lit up the room with her smile, and we spent the evening walking through the gallery together, discussing my photographs and our lives. There was a genuine chemistry between us, a connection built on honesty and openness that felt refreshing after the tumult of my past. At one point, she turned to me, her expression serious. "You've really poured your heart into this work, Mark. It's inspiring to see how you've grown." "Thank you, Sarah," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. "It's been a journey, and I'm still figuring things out, but I'm starting to understand the importance of embracing the present and letting go of the past." As the night came to a close, I realized how far I had come. I had transformed my pain into something beautiful, and I felt a renewed sense of hope. I had stepped out of the maze of lies that had once trapped me and into a world filled with possibility. As I said goodbye to my guests and packed up, Sarah approached me with a glimmer in her eyes. "I'd love to grab coffee with you sometime, if you're interested," she said, her voice warm and inviting. I smiled, feeling a genuine excitement for the first time in a long while. "I'd like that. Let's make it happen." In that moment, I knew I was ready to open my heart again, but this time I would do it on my terms. Jenna had taught me valuable lessons about trust and self-worth, and I was determined to carry those lessons forward. As I left the gallery that night, I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I was ready to embrace the unknown, knowing that my past would not define me. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and full of hope, ready to navigate whatever life had in store for me next. The journey ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but I felt equipped to handle them. I was no longer the man who would be manipulated by lies. I was a man who had faced the truth and come out the other side. And for that, I was grateful. With each step I took into the future, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. I was ready to forge ahead, living life authentically, with no more masks or pretenses, just me, the real me, ready to embrace whatever came next.